we have Alex calling in from Oklahoma who wants to speak a little bit more to this, and I'm super interested to hear what she/they are the pronouns. I'm super interested to hear what Alex has to say. Alex, welcome to Secular Sexuality. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I just, wanted to call in and because I heard you guys talking about asexuality, and given that Pride Month tends to be the month where, asexuality and aromanticism comes up as if it belongs in the LGBT community, I figured that I could talk about, being ace, and especially in the South, and kind of how that feeds into purity culture.
Yeah, no, please do.
How has it been different for you in the South? Yeah.
Because, we kind of already talked about it, but there's this idea of there's this way that you're supposed to behave, and that when you become a certain age that you're supposed to experience this sort of deviancy and this sort of attraction. And then as someone who was ace, I never experienced that. And so I'm being surrounded by all these people telling me how I'm going to be broken, but then never experiencing that. And so just kind of being left out, and then wondering, why am I not feeling the things that I should be feeling? And why am I different? And then the other thing with being ace is that, well, I was familiar with the LGBT and the letters in there. I didn't know that asexuality was an option. And so I didn't even know it was possible to not feel certain things and that it was valid. And so it felt like that I was being pushed to become something broken and deviant. And when I've tried to go into counseling and look at different things in that way, I was told that my lack of feelings were healthy, that they were just how everyone was supposed to behave, and that's the way things were, and that all of my feelings and everything, they weren't ace, they weren't anything special. That was just how I was supposed to be. And I dropped that therapist pretty fast, but I went to a lot of ace groups, and it turns out that a lot of people in the spectrum had this feeling of not belonging and being this sort of broken freak. And then again, when reaching out and looking for help without knowing that being asexual or any part of the aspec community was possible, just not knowing that. And for me, it was more damaging than the gender dysphoria that I've gone through. And so and I know it's not the same for everyone, but it's like I would have rather have just gone through all the issues of being non-binary than been asexual if I had to choose, just because of the lack of information and the feeling of not being a correct or whole human being.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, we minimize female pleasure so much, and we joke about the female orgasm and all of these kinds of things, to the extent that women who would otherwise be allosexual and would have satisfying sex lives, a lot of what Erin's been describing to us, are lumped in with people where that's not at all the case and not at all appropriate.
And it's really difficult to find that language too. Like, I know when I was young, growing up as an irreligious person, I didn't even know what the word atheist was. So I probably was an atheist, but I didn't even know what that word was. And I think that's sort of a good analogy for kind of what you're describing, Alex, is just finding that language is so difficult when you just haven't been educated on it. And that I think is part of the real insidious nature of purity culture, is that you're so sheltered from these other things that are perfectly normal. They're perfectly normal part of the human experience, but you're just taught that anything other than penis and vagina, tab A into tab B sex, is completely wrong, and you're broken because of it. Is that sort of resonating with you a little?
Yeah, that's 100% what it is, and that a lot of the people feel that it's broken. And I think there's also something else that plays in to the aspec community that tends to not be talked about, is that because we have a lack of sexual attraction, you can still be sex positive, sex neutral, or be sex repulsed, and that because of purity culture, there tends to be a lack of like we don't have the boundaries to be able to express ourselves and to validate ourselves. But then again, within the community, there are issues of recognizing what are the boundaries that we're supposed to have, that, that we should have for other people who are allosexual or ace people who are sex positive. And how do we have conversations that are also inclusive to them without invalidating their own experiences? I see this mostly like within response to the kink community, and a lot of asexuals rejecting the kink community who are sex negative, and not understanding the history that the kink community has played in LGBT rights and everything like that.
Yeah, well, not to mention that a number of otherwise grayscale or largely sexually uninterested folks often do find a home in kink. And, that's certainly not going to be every ace person's experience, but I think that there's a bigger overlap there than people maybe realize.
Yeah. It sounds like to me that you've experienced a lot of feeling a lot of maybe invisible to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And I think it further goes to like this idea of education and finding language, finding appropriate kind of ways to explain your own experience and educating the larger masses about it. Like this is something that could be so much easier if people just allowed for a further larger spectrum of experiences within the whole conversation, and letting that be kind of steered by yourself or by people who are going through that experiences, listening to you and believing how you are experiencing it. I think that there's a real need for that, because the alternative is that many people feel extremely invisible to the larger population because they're not even a part of the conversation appropriately.
Absolutely. And that's also one of the other reasons why I wanted to call in and why I try to speak up in my own personal life, is because I know what that feeling of invisibility, I know what it did to me, and I know what the pain it caused. And I know that if I just had at least one person that I had in my life or that was visible or some form of connection, that there's a very good chance that I would not have experienced the pain that I did. And so I kind of, I've got the ace flag hanging up outside my house, and I try to be as open as, I mentally can handle at whatever moment, because I know what it would have done for me. And so hopefully if someone is going through that, they can see someone and be like, well, hold on, this kind of sounds like what I'm going through.
This is real. This is an option. Yeah, just because it is Pride Month, it's probably worth taking a moment to say there are good people, there are allies that will still, say things like LGBT, blah, 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 or, alphabet, blah, blah, blah. And I appreciate that there is not a intention for dismissiveness there, hopefully. But it's important to remember that there are letters that are significant after the T. Asexual is one of those, and these smaller communities don't get our attention in ways that they really should. So, Alex, I really appreciate you being willing to walk us through that experience a little bit and just kind of show people that there are other ways to be and exist.
I also want to just
absolutely.
I also wanted to say thank you so much for whatever work you have done in sharing your experience, whether it's been online or you said you had your flag up, and just that's a lot of work that you have put into explaining this to people. Coming from the background that I have come from, I had no knowledge about this a few years ago, and I appreciate the patience that people have with people who are trying their best to learn as well. So that's a lot of mental work for you. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you've done and any steps along the way, because it is helping move people and move more people into the right frame for looking at these things.
Yeah, and thank you so much for letting me call in and talk about this.
Well, thank you for participating in the chat, Alex. I always see Alex in the chat for SecX. So, folks, if you want to participate, you can always join us there. You can call in. Lots of different ways you can participate. But Alex, thank you very much for calling, and I appreciate that perspective. That was cool. That was a good call.
All right. Well, have a great night, guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
You too.